Warning, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to state my opinion. Just like any community out there, the Hollow Knight community can be very stupid and annoying at times. Why am I attacking the Hollow Knight community directly? Because I've got a bone to pick with them. Because there's so much loyalty and adoration for Hollow Knight, there's also some really foolish people out there that are either knowingly or unknowingly encouraging potential stagnation. And I hate stagnation. That, and also this. Any new Metroidvania.
Is this a Hollow Knight?
You know what this sounds like? These people. Any hard game out there.
Is this Dark Souls? This isn't Dark Souls, blah blah blah.
Stop it. Get some help.
God, you're just as bad as these people. In fact, that's a great example right there. Just because Hollow Knight has similarities to Dark Souls doesn't mean it's Dark Souls. Sure, it has a moody atmosphere, beautiful art design, an interesting and dynamic world, but that does not mean that it's a Dark Souls clone. But I mean, if you're already looking like a clown, you might as well be the clown, am I right? Look, just because Exhibit A and B share similarities between one another doesn't mean they equal each other. Could you imagine the Blasphemous community doing this to Mariachi Legends or Eden's Guardian? Could you imagine all the Doom fans doing this to all the first-person shooters? Could you imagine all the Vampire Survivor fans doing this to any of the knockoffs? No, of course not, because it's stupid. Oh, and I want to point out that one of those knockoffs is either just as good or even better than the original Vampire Survivors. And it's free. Talk about a flex. How dare any community think that a certain way to create something belongs to only one certain entity? Like seriously, get a life. Get a freaking life, man. You guys will seriously go out of your way to blame a game for being Hollow Knight, play the game, find out it's not Hollow Knight, and then start complaining that it's not the game you didn't want it to be in the first place. You guys are pretentious, elitist, jackass snobs that like to smell your own farts and get off on it. Some of you really need a reality check, and that's Hollow Knight isn't original. Hollow Knight is an amazing game. However, it isn't original. In fact, nothing in this world is original because it's always built upon other ideas from other people from other times. There is no such thing as originality because it always stems from something else. We're always building on top of something that already exists. The fact of the matter is that Hollow Knight straight up stole game ideas, gimmicks, and mechanics from other games, and that's a good thing. Things copying other things is good. DuckTales, Shovel Knight, hell, even Zelda 2 had the pogo mechanic well before Hollow Knight. Zelda had the heart health UI long before Hollow Knight. Again, Zelda coming in with the 4 heart piece gimmick long before Hollow Knight did. Dark Souls had the sit down to save gimmick before Hollow Knight had the bench. And No More Heroes had the sit down to save gimmick before Dark Souls. And even before that, Ico had the sit down to save gimmick before everyone else. And it probably even goes further than that. And how about, I don't know, the whole genre being called Metroidvania? You know, Metroid and Castlevania, 2 different games. Hollow Knight didn't come up with these things, and yet people have the audacity to say,
That's a Hollow Knight clone.
Oh, Hollow Knight's a platformer, right? Well, clearly it's a Mario clone then. Oh, speaking of Mario, don't forget that the charm system that Hollow Knight had was inspired by the badge system from Paper Mario. Oh, and look at Silksong. Uh-oh, that looks like an escape level. Well, clearly Silksong stole from Ori, which stole from Metroid. Do you see how stupid this all sounds now? Let's do another example. Let's talk about Deviator for a sec. Even if Deviator was a straight one-to-one ripoff of Hollow Knight, which it's not, that's up to Team Cherry to pursue legal matters or not. It's not for you to worry about in White Knight for Team Cherry. Believe me, Team Cherry's just fine without you and your help. Not only that, but just because a game copies some things doesn't mean it's not bringing other interesting ideas into the mix. Learn from my mistake. I used to be like you. I gatekept God of War back then, and I scoffed at Dante's Inferno when it first came out. You know where that got me? Not having any more games like God of War. Hell, I couldn't even rely on God of War to give me what I wanted. Top 10 anime betrayals of all time. That day, I vowed not to ever complain about copycats ever again, because copycats are the reason I have more variety of what I love. Someone taking inspiration or straight up stealing ideas can lead to subpar product, but it can also lead to enhancement and innovation of older ideas. And that's exactly what Hollow Knight is and what Team Cherry did. It all comes down to intent. People pick up on that stuff, and if it's not good, it will be left behind where it belongs. Let me say this again. Hollow Knight is a great game because it not only took inspiration, but it also straight up copied other game ideas. I mean, you already know where they got the death mechanic from. Software. Look, just because Ari, William, and Jack said that they weren't inspired by Dark Souls doesn't mean they weren't inspired by Dark Souls or some other FromSoft game. Lying in the media happens all the time, either on purpose or not. In fact, I can prove it right here. This post from Pogo says that Ari did, in fact, play a little bit of Bloodborne. And right here, it says that the guys did play a little bit of Dark Souls. Now, we don't know how much a little bit is, but it sure was enough to get some of those mechanics into their game, wasn't it? Now, I'd personally call that inspiration, but Team Cherry sure didn't. Just because a game has hand-drawn animated characters, is a Metroidvania, has a dash mechanic, a magic system, a badge system, and a giant robot, doesn't mean that it's a Hollow Knight clone. Which brings me to Crowsworn. That's right. That's what this video is actually about. This is part 2 of my Crowsworn backer demo critique. Shitting on the Hollow Knight community was just a bonus. Now, obviously, this isn't the whole of the Hollow Knight community, but it is enough people for me to make this video. Some people have accused Crowsworn for being a Hollow Knight clone, and I refute that. In fact, I believe that Mongoose Rodeo have taken us to the next step in Metroidvania evolution. While yes, Crowsworn is inspired by Hollow Knight in some ways, that's not the only game it's inspired by. There's Devil May Cry with the guns and style, and there's Bloodborne for the story, atmosphere, and characters. And Hollow Knight was also inspired by Bloodborne and Dark Souls. Wow! As I've said before, just because it's inspired by these things doesn't make it these things. There are so many examples as to why Crowsworn is already either better than Hollow Knight or on par with it. And I'm gonna list all of that right now. Remember, the word of the day is dynamic. 1. In Silksong, you have a saw blade. In Crowsworn, you become the saw blade. Alright, that one was just a funny, just like the robot. But let's get serious. Begin. 1. Matthew Leth Griffin. Leth has done PR and marketing for games like Stardew Valley and Hollow Knight, and now he's doing it for Crowsworn. Though he started from humble beginnings, the man clearly knows quality when he sees it.
Cool bug facts!
The Crowsworn developers are friends with the developer that made Stardew Valley, and Stardew Valley was marketed by Leth. Kinda interesting how they all connect, and maybe that's why Leth is the PR and marketing guy. But my point in bringing this all up is that if Leth is doing PR and marketing for Crowsworn, that signals to me that Crowsworn is either just as good or even better than those other games. Other than the first 2 games Leth marketed for, Leth has had a really good track record with schmoozing the right people and getting those games in front of the right eyes. So I'd say that Crowsworn's definitely gonna do some crazy numbers, just like Stardew Valley, and just like Hollow Knight. After playing Crowsworn for a ridiculous amount of time, I can tell you that this game is going to be a very big deal. Now, why is that? 2. Variety, style, fluidity, expression, depth. All of these words describe Crowsworn. Crowsworn plays faster than Hollow Knight. I couldn't believe it. Hollow Knight is already so tight, quick, and snappy. It genuinely surprised me how much more faster the combat was in Crowsworn. Just check out this boss fight. Now, there was a lot going on there, so let's unpack what you just saw. Firstly, this game offers you 3 different ways to attack. There's the scythe, the magic, and the guns. Now, not only do you have this awesome variety of weaponry to choose from, you also have layers to that variety as well. Tap the magic, and you got this. Hold it down, and you got that. The gun actually has 3 layers. Tap the bullet, blap, blap, blap. Hold it down just a little bit, and it auto-shoots all but 1 bullet. Fully charge it, and you got this. The combat in this game is dynamic, and because it's dynamic, it's expressive. People get to choose how they tackle these obstacles and express themselves. You can either jump and dash or dodge, roll, and pass. The choice is yours. Because there's so much variety, you could easily go back to a boss fight and refight it with a completely different strategy. Take, for instance, the spikes. You can do it the way the game intended you to do it, which is to pogo off of them, but you could also just Krovian slam the ground, or even just shoot the gun to stay in the air, thus flexing on your enemies. All of them are viable options. Even Silksong doesn't look like it's gonna match up to what Crowsworn is doing here. Hollow Knight won't ever be as fast, nor as stylish, nor as expressive as Crowsworn is. And for those reasons alone, Crowsworn not only has every right to exist, but clearly it shows it is not a Hollow Knight clone. Oh, and I left out one more layer to the combat system, the Overmalice. This right here is your magic meter, and if you fill it up, you can do 3 magic attacks before it's depleted. But if you decide to hold on to that magic, you can overclock that meter and do special moves such as this. Hollow Knight's got nothing on Crowsworn. 3. Movement and traversal, or as some people would say, schmovement. Though we only have trailers to go off on with some of the things I'm about to say, I can tell you right now that what I've played and what you just saw backs up those very statements I'm about to make. Crowsworn will be fast, fluid, stylish, expressive, and fun, not only in combat, but also in its traversal through the world as well. Comboing those pogos, those dashes, and diagonal downward kicks are gonna be so damn slick. While Silksong also looks like it's getting an upgrade with its traversal as well, which I'm very excited to see. It's clear that it's going for a completely different approach, just like its combat. It seems that Silksong is going to have more interesting mechanics to play with while roaming through Farloom, but it doesn't look like it's going to be nearly as fast nor as combo heavy as Crowsworn. For me personally, I like games that have a good flow to them, and Crowsworn looks like it's going to be super fluid. 4. Dynamic enemies and enemy AI. Some of the enemies in Crowsworn feel really dynamic and are really memorable. 4 or 5 of the regular enemies and one mini-boss really stood out to me in this demo. That and the Eldritch Mosquito, but that's for other reasons we'll get into later. When I see some of these enemies in Crowsworn, I'm reminded of Hollow Knight enemies, but honestly, the dynamic ones feel a lot better in Crowsworn. They have this feeling of being more organic, intelligent, and strategizing. Some of these enemies in the demo not only attack you, but also evade your attack as well, and that creates a whole new dynamic to the combat, something that I really like. There's also enemies in Crowsworn that were better utilized than Hollow Knight, like the Sword and Shield dude for instance. Like, I know this dude is basically this dude, but I feel like I actually learned something from this one comparatively to that one. The Sword and Shield dude was a great tutorial enemy because he not only taught me the importance of the dodge, but he also taught me the importance of the parry as well as the pogo. We'll get more into that later. This bug would have taught me a great lesson in pogoing and parrying had Team Cherry actually taught me the importance of the pogo and not made the parry system so unreliable. We'll get more into that later as well. A lot of the enemies in Crowsworn are pretty damn dynamic in one way or another, whether it's variety in attacks or adaptive enemy design. The Staff Dude is a great example when it comes to variety. He has 3 attacks. He can swipe at you, shoot out a long-range magic attack, and he can jump into the air and smash the ground, thus making you not only have to dodge his initial attack, but also avoid the shockwaves coming from it as well. Remember, you have all 3 of these attacks and the fact that he can evade your attack as well. It becomes a nice little dance. Now let's take a look at an adaptive enemy. This here is the bow guy, but the bow guy isn't just the bow guy. If you get too close to him, he'll show you he ain't no pushover. He will attack you with a bow? Mongoose Rodeo, we need to have a talk real quick. Why the hell is the archer attacking you with the bow when he has a perfectly good arrow to stab you with? Can you please fix this? Thanks. I also really love how Mongoose Rodeo has taken aspects from other bosses and enemies and fused them into one entity. This boss has the adaptive traits of the Watcher Knights, the boulders of the False Knight, and the weapons of the Sword and Shield dude. I am very excited to see more enemies created like this. I love this. Now, that's not to say that all the enemies in Crowsworn are dynamic, because they're not. Crowsworn's got its own one-trick ponies and scripted boss fights just as much as Hollow Knight, but when Mongoose Rodeo does make a dynamic enemy, man, they freaking nail it. Mongoose Rodeo is apparently doing one more interesting thing with the enemies. they're gonna create some kind of turf war, or as they call it, competing factions. There's not a lot of info on it right now, so I can't say much about it, but it does seem rather interesting. 5. More fully realized ideas. While Hollow Knight had some really great mechanics in it, some of them felt very half-baked. Some of those things being the pogo, the parry, Fog Canyon, and this. Seriously, these shade gates are so bad. They are arbitrarily placed in like 4 or 5 places in Hollowness, and they seem like such a lazy way of gating the player due to how they were implemented in the game. And Fog Canyon is not only one of the tiniest biomes in the game, but also the most bizarre and nonsensical one as well. It is so out of place in the world of Hollow Knight, and I have no idea what Team Cherry was even thinking with that one. The 2 things I want to focus on the most though are the pogoing and the parry. Let's start with the pogo first. Though the pogo felt amazing, there weren't that many points in the game where you had to use it, and there wasn't really any boss fights that demanded that you use it either. I also found it odd how the game never really taught you how to pogo properly. Like what? It teaches you how to attack if you don't hit this door. It also gives you a prompt at least 2 times to teach you how to heal. And when you get the Vengeful Spirit, it teaches you again at least 2 times. But it doesn't ever give you that prompt for the pogo? There are so many people, including myself, that didn't use the pogo throughout the game because the mechanic wasn't ever properly taught to the player. Crowsworn, however, does a lot better job with this. Though it doesn't outright teach you how to pogo with any prompts, it does have some gaseous hanging ball sacks in a row in a certain part of the demo. Now these gaseous ball sacks are great for 2 reasons. It teaches the player how to pogo, and it teaches the player to be quick as the ball sack fart gas does damage to the player if they linger. Now there's one more great thing about this part of the game. It not only has you pogo on gaseous ball sacks, it also throws another obstacle your way: spikes. In order to get across to the other side of this wall, you have to pogo across those spikes, thus teaching you that you can pogo on multiple things. That is significantly better than anything Hollow Knight ever did. There was such a lack of mandatory pogoing in Hollow Knight that you thought it was more of a suggestion than an actual integral part to the game. Though the pogo was a great idea, and I love it dearly, it was hardly utilized through the game. It's no wonder why so many people felt blindsided by the Path of Pain. It's because there was so very little incentive to ever pogo throughout the game. Also, if you're playing on controller and trying to do nail arts, good luck, unless you change the default controls. Nail arts are a must for the 3rd Coliseum, and yet the default controls are not set up in a way that you can easily hold down the attack button and jump at the same time. Both Hollow Knight and Crowsworn have this problem, and I'm actually pretty irritated by this, because these default controls are handicapping the player from experiencing all that these games have to offer. And the average player has no idea about this. Seriously, if you're playing on controller, change the default controls now. These are my custom controls for both games, and I highly recommend playing like this or close to it. And then there's the parrying. Another half-baked idea. So half-baked, in fact, that people would say that Hollow Knight doesn't even have a parry system in the game. But it does. You see this enemy? You can parry its attack. You see this one? You can parry that too. I bet you didn't know you could parry this one. Or this one either. And you can parry the stalactites as well. There were parts in this game where you could actually parry them. It seems like a random cool gimmick, which is what I thought it was at first, but apparently it's an actual real mechanic. It's just really finicky. this person right here proved that you can actually parry every time if you have the right timing. So it is an actual mechanic. It's just a poorly implemented one. No average player is going to be able to ever pull this off. But as a gimmick, it's an amazing feature. And it is so satisfying when it randomly happens while you're fighting. I don't know what exactly happened with these two mechanics in the game, but Team Cherry definitely dropped the ball with both of them. And Fog Canyon. And other little nitpicky things in the game. Crowsworn, however, seems to be making these two mechanics integral to the gameplay, which I am very excited for. If there's 5 mechanics I love in a video game, it's grappling, pogoing, dashing, dodging, and parrying. And it looks like Crowsworn's got 4 out of the 5. I love parrying in games. Nine Souls, Fury, Cookie Cutter, Blasphemous. All of these games have a great parry system, and Crowsworn is no different. Check this out. You can parry knives, you can parry claws, you can parry arrows, and if you're good enough, you can even parry the fast-paced Eldritch Mosquito shots. But my favorite is the potential stalemate that you can do with the Sword and Shield guy. I also really liked that Mongoose Rodeo put an item in a place where you had to pogo off an enemy in order to get that very item. I love that type of design, and I want to see more of that kind of stuff in video games. There's not enough of it. Hollow Knight didn't really ever have scenarios like this, and if it did, it was so far and few between that it wasn't memorable to the gameplay experience. I'm happy to see that Mongoose Rodeo is attempting to remedy the faults of Team Cherry and actually incorporate more of those half-baked ideas into the core experience of their game. Now let's give credit where credit's due. Team Cherry also seems to be fixing these issues with Silk Song. In the trailer, you can see more pogo-heavy areas, as well as Hornet being able to use counter parry as a move. This all looks very promising, and I'm excited to see these mechanics fully shine in both games. Six, music. Though there's not enough Crowsworn music to compare with Hollow Knight at this time, what we do have is very good. And what I can say is that Hollow Knight and Crowsworn both have dynamic music. Now, if you don't know what dynamic music is, it's basically when the music changes based upon certain variables that happen in the game. This is probably one of the best examples that I can show you of what dynamic music is actually like. You notice how calm and neutral the music is, just walking around and even fighting the smaller enemies? That's because there's really no threat to your exploration. That is, until you meet this guy. When you get in a fight with him, the music changes and becomes more intense, more dramatic, and for very good reason. This enemy is your first threat. He deals 2 mask damage if you get hit by him, which is double the damage of what the other enemies do. After you defeat this enemy though, the music turns back into its calm, neutral sound that it once had. That is what dynamic music is. But that's only one example of dynamic music. There's also the messenger when you go underwater, as well as going through the portals. And then there's Ender Lilies. Ender Lilies has such a beautiful sound design. Pretty much layers of music are either added or subtracted, dependent on where you are in the game. So say I'm sitting at a save. The music here is going to be simple and minimalistic. But when I go over here, all of a sudden, the music gains more layers and complexity. It's simply beautiful. Now, the dynamic music in Hollow Knight is definitely one of the many reasons why Hollow Knight is as good as it is. Christopher Larkin is an amazing musician, and Hollow Knight wouldn't be anywhere close to what it is without him. If you don't know, this was the original placeholder music for the Hollow Knight Kickstarter trailer. Fucking so dumb. Did you happen to see the sword and shield bug in the trailer? Did you happen to see how he kept his shield above his head? Yeah, that was the way that it was intended to work. Something went wrong though, obviously. Back to it though. Christopher Larkin definitely made that sound so much better. As I was saying, Christopher Larkin is an amazing musician, and his work on Hollow Knight is one of the big reasons as to why Hollow Knight shines so brightly as it does. And speaking of Christopher Larkin, if you don't know what Expand is, go play that game right now. Christopher Larkin did the music for it, and it's an amazing and unique 2-hour experience. If you love Christopher Larkin's music, you owe it to yourself to play Expand. Go play it, sit with whatever feeling you get with it, and after you're done with that, then go buy the OST. For me personally, the game is a masterpiece, and it's also a spiritual experience. I haven't given you any examples of Crowsworn's dynamic music, have I? Well, here's one now. Seven, dynamic sound design. Dynamic sound design is very different from dynamic music. The sound design creates the atmosphere, the immersion, and believability of that area that you're in. So let's go ahead and look at Ender Lilies again. Listen to the rain. Listen to the footsteps change dependent on the material the character is walking on. And then listen to how the rain quiets down once I find cover from that rain. These are all dynamic sound design. Here in Hollow Knight, you can hear the water dropping from the ceiling of the cave. And here in Crowsworn, you got one of my favorite dynamic sound designs. The sound moving from the left earphone to the right earphone, dependent on where you are, comparatively to what's making that noise. That's good sound design. There's also another type of dynamic sound design, And that's when you put two different sounds on one item. Take this minecart for instance. Not only does it have the sound of wood breaking, but also of metal getting mangled. I'm actually disappointed that the barrels don't have this two sound system going on, because there is blatantly metal and wood there as well. Though you could probably turn Hollow Knight into an amazing ASMR. Crowsworn's is just as good in its own way. Obviously, I'd take Hollow Knight over Crowsworn if I wanted to make an enjoyable ASMR. However, Crowsworn has more brutal and visceral impact to it. And it's got some really satisfying sounds in it too. Like the carry-on flask filling up. And the assassin's blades tinging off the ground after you kill them. Seriously, that sound is so satisfying, and I want more. Mongoose, give me more. Mongoose Rodeo also did an amazing job with the Eldritch Mosquito. That sound is so damn uncomfortable. In the end, both games deserve just as much praise as one another. That and Ender Lilies as well. 8. Grafting. Or as I like to call it, body augmentation. Grafting is basically Crowsworn's charm system. Instead of charms though, you use body parts, like heads, arms, torsos, and legs. Each body part weighs a certain amount, so you can only equip so much before it affects you, kinda like the notch system in Hollow Knight. While there's no info on any synergies being in the game yet, what we do have is an overcumber system. I actually really like this system, because it's not just a one blanket double damage mechanic like Hollow Knight's overcharm system. It's how much of your life are you willing to risk for that extra ability. Sometimes it's totally worth doing, because it's only one life point being sacrificed, but adding too much is not worth the risk. You can do it though. I also really like how potentially we'll be getting a body part progression system with some of the items. In the demo, you find a skull. You'll also find this gold vial. Take it to the blacksmith and boom bada bing, you got Face of Splendor, the upgraded version of that skull. Now, not only is this upgraded skull good for getting more animus faster, but it's also got another use, a multi-use. If you go to this statue, you'll see that it has gold on its head, just like the Face of Splendor. Wear the Face of Splendor, look down for 5 seconds, and bing bada boom, you just solved the riddle. I also want to give a shout out to Blasphemous real quick, because I loved what they did with their multi-use items. I'll give you one example. These bone pieces that you collect throughout the world are not only keys to open a door, but 3 specific bones contain important information in order to solve the 3 riddles. I don't think enough games use this kind of cool mechanic, and I'm actually really happy to see Mongoose Rodeo attempting to do so. Nine, exploration. If you know Hollow Knight, you know that it is king when it comes to exploration and atmosphere. Just like how Guacamelee is king at tutorials and encouraging players to try things they normally wouldn't. Something that Team Cherry could definitely learn from. But I digress. One of the biggest reasons that people love Hollow Knight and Outer Wilds is due to how explorative the world is. Around every corner is a potential new mystery to stumble across, piece together, and solve. But just as much as it holds mystery, it also holds danger. Thoroughly exploring Hollow Nest rewards the player for doing so. Hollow Knight really respects the time of the player. There's always a new charm to find, another mask shard, another vessel fragment, another unique item, another boss, another special ability, another NPC, another piece of lore. There's always something to find. If you're curious enough and adventurous enough, this world yields many secrets and rewards. Hollow Knight deserves every bit of praise for its masterful exploration, and Team Cherry should 100% be proud of what they created. They really did do a great job, and I'm happy to say that Mongoose Rodeo also really nailed this aspect as well. Exploration felt very worthwhile in Crowsworn. Getting 100% in Crowsworn doubled the amount of my playtime. Finding everything in the demo felt extremely rewarding, as everything was so cleverly hidden. You seriously had to scour the entire area of the room because you could have very easily missed something. Like this. Or this. Crowsworn is also apparently going to have optional areas in the game as well. So think of things like the Hive and Path of Pain. Pretty exciting stuff. However, I'm hoping that Mongoose Rodeo does a better job at hiding these optional areas, because Team Cherry did a terrible job with some of them. Case in point, the Dung Defender. Team Cherry, you have gone against the very rule that you have taught the player, which is to look for shaky ground to find secrets. Why isn't this a shaky ground? How is anybody supposed to find this out without looking it up? And again, you did this in the White Palace, but this one's not as egregious because you at least made a clear visual indication that this floor is compromised. But you still went against your own rules. Anyways, yeah, I'm hoping that Crowsworn does a better job. Dynamic World. Again, Hollow Knight is king when it comes to making an interesting and adaptive world. There are so many memorable moments within Hollow Knight, such as this.
Destio, Gio. Gio.
And this. And who can forget this?
Go namane churo. To staccando.
Quarrel, you were the best character. From the NPCs to the synergies, the world of Deep Nest felt very alive and dynamic. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you here. There really isn't that much info on Crowsworn's dynamic world. I tried reaching out to Mongoose Rodeo, asking them to give me a couple examples of how their world will be dynamic, but they replied back with, "Sorry, that's top secret." Even though we don't really have anything to go off of, we do have the press kit, and in there, it does look like there is a main hub. I'm guessing that this hub will fill with other NPCs as you find them throughout the world, but this is all speculation. I can say that the dev's reply confirms that a dynamic world design is in the game. I guess we'll just have to wait and see how they decide to go about it. 11. Animation. Man, the animations are great. From the gameplay to the cutscenes, all of them are stunning and smooth. and also skippable for all the people that don't care about any of that stuff. For the people that do, though, the improvements to some of these animations are impressive. This is what the death animation used to look like when you died. And this is what it looks like now. Night and day difference. And what's great about these cutscenes is that this ain't no false advertisement like certain other indie developers and publishers love to do. Look, I'm not saying these games are bad, but when you see this as the advertisement and this is the actual game, that feels like a bait and switch. That is blatant false advertisement. Not only that, it is needlessly expensive.
Did you know 2D animated game trailers cost around $1,000 per second to produce?
What, are you advertising a show? Or are you advertising a game?
Silo, the Emperor called you a thief and a smuggler, but the people called you a hero. And they need that hero now.
If the animations being shown here were actually part of the game, in some way, I wouldn't have a problem with them. But that's not how they're being used. If the developers and publishers want to add a little fan service for the gamers before the start of the game, in the game, I don't have a problem with that. Monster Boy is a great example of this. But for the animation to be created solely for the purpose of false advertisement, that is disgusting, and it should be illegal. However, there are exceptions to the rule.
Listening? Okay. Grass grows, birds fly, sun shines, and brother, I hurt people. Boink! I'm a force of nature. Bonk! If you were from where I was from, you'd be f***ing dead. Woo!
While those meet the character videos are not in the actual game, they do stay consistent to the art style and graphics of the actual game. When watching those videos, I don't ever feel bamboozled or tricked after watching them. And the trailers feel more like fan service than any advertisement. Anyway, I gotta get back to Crowsworn. Thankfully, Crowsworn doesn't do any of this bad business practice. What you see is what you get. Whether it's a special over malice technique, gaining a new ability, or dying in the game, you will have all sorts of animations. I'll give you one more. Here, you can see that eventually we get the Scythe Juggle ability, which I can't wait to get my hands on. And it looks like you'll be fighting fire with this boss. But at the beginning of the second trailer, you can clearly see the protagonist throw the scythe, meaning that this animation will most likely play after gaining that ability. Now, I don't know about you, but this feels like a refreshing, interesting, and dynamic change to the traditional formula of gaming. And I, for one, am all for it. Little details. Both Hollow Knight and Crowsworn have these important little details to them, but I want to point something out real quick. What would Hollow Knight have been like if those little details weren't as important to Team Cherry? Well, we can actually find this answer within the Whole Knight Kickstarter, as well as Team Cherry's YouTube channel. I'm sure a lot of you don't know this, but Whole Knight actually started off very humble and kinda rough. Christopher Larkin wasn't hired at this time, so the music was serviceable, but it wasn't that good. Desolate Dive had no pizzazz and was rather dull. The purple effect and the crystals around the Super Dash didn't exist at this time. Enemy attacks were more gaseous and looked pretty janky. Getting hit by an enemy just made the playable character flash red, and the game was significantly slower and very sluggish looking. Like I said, humble beginnings. I'm glad that Whole Knight became what it is today, even if some of those ideas in it did feel a little abandoned. But had Team Cherry just stuck with the status quo, I don't think that Whole Knight would have ever have been as memorable nor as appreciated as it is today. As you can see, little details really do make a big difference and can significantly alter the experience for the player. But it's gotta be done correctly. You probably didn't know this, but Crowsworn also had its humble beginnings as well. Take a look at this very early build of the game. What was up with that resolution? What is that, 360p? Is that the game or is that just how it was uploaded? Probably a little bit of both, honestly. And what's going on with the out of sync and continual slashing sounds? That was so bizarre. Did you also notice the lack of dynamic sound design? Well, that's because that came later, and the first attempts weren't that great. This is actually straight from the Crowsworn press kit, believe it or not. If you're wearing headphones right now, you're probably not having a very good time. Let me fix that for you. While dynamic sound design is a great little detail that you can add to enhance the experience of your game, it can also be detrimental to the experience if you're not doing it correctly. I just wanted to point this out real quick because I don't think people consciously appreciate the efforts that go into successfully pulling off these little details. With that in mind, now that you potentially have more appreciation for these things, I'd like to list off some of Crowsworn's little details that I appreciate. 12.5? Little details appreciation list? Sure, why not? The bullet shells falling to the ground. The awesome T-pose when reloading your gun. All the animations that you won't ever fully appreciate because functionality comes before style, like the gun's charge shot. The diagonal downward kick. And the magic circle dash. Vertical dash too. Throwing hands. Seriously, this is such a cool gimmick. And Mongoose, if you don't go all Kingdom Hearts with this idea, or something like it, I'm gonna be really disappointed in you guys. I really hope you utilize this gimmick well in the game. Rock debris. Dust. Enemies falling to pieces when you kill them. Enemies bouncing off the ground when you kill them. All the environmental destructible items. Oh my god, 3 things in one here. The assassins hiding behind the stained glass. 2, the parry. Oh, that sound is so satisfying. And 3, as I already said, the assassin's blades tinging off the ground. Oh, so good. The shadows on the wall. This one is actually really impressive. The shadows are such a cool little detail that really adds to the mood and immersion of the game. The cloak flowing behind the protagonist as he runs, while also hearing the faint sound of fabric rubbing together. The bones getting kicked up in the bone place. The beautiful orange petals daintily falling from the sky. The glorious city with the white feathers softly falling from the sky. These purple butterflies. The mist in the foreground. The sound becoming muffled when near death. Being able to actually feel the sound effects without even hearing them. This one's a wombo combo. The blood mist, the distinct attack marks depending on the weapon, the red orb that expands from the character taking damage, as well as that character turning white for a split second, and of course, the perfect amount of screen shake. All of that together makes such a great experience. I'll give you 2 more. There's the protagonist dusting off his shoulder when idle. And there's the cute little shake that the Eldritch Mosquito does, basically saying, "I see you." Oh yeah, Crowsworn's got some great little details. 13. Closure. Mongoose Rodeo is at least on par with Team Cherry, and I hope this video showed that to you. Crowsworn doesn't deserve to be called a Whole Knight clone, nor do any of these other games. And saying that is not only disingenuous, but also disrespectful. No, Mongoose Rodeo is doing what every game developer should be doing, which is to take, combine, and innovate on already existing ideas. Everything about Crowsworn excites me, and I am so entirely proud to be a backer of this game. Mongoose Rodeo have continually been responsive to not only me, but also to the backer community, and they have given us meaningful updates every 3 months, which is something I can't say for other companies. I have loved my entire journey the whole way through, thus far. Mongoose Rodeo is an awesome company. They aren't afraid of a little confrontation, nor are they above listening to other people's opinions. And that is something that I absolutely respect. Now, I don't want you to think that this is all just glaze and praise for Mongoose Rodeo, so I'll just remind you right now that there is a part 1 to this whole critique, and part 1 is my brutally honest criticisms towards the demo. I'm not just a hater, though I do hate, and I'm not just a fanboy either. I'm a critiquer. I know it's critic, but I don't like that word. And I've got all sorts of opinions about all sorts of things, which is why this video even exists at all. Anywho, I'm Kukukachu. That was part 2 of the Crowsworn backer demo critique. Thanks for watching.
I really, truly don't think there's anything wrong with people emulating art.
Every single piece of art is influenced by another piece of art.
It's derivative. Everything. The human experience is derivative. That doesn't mean it's lesser because of it. That means it's greater.
It's necessary for evolution.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to build on what comes before.